Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Smyth with the National Library and Archives Canada. I'm very pleased to be here today to facilitate this discussion at the International Internet Preservation Consortium's annual Web Archiving Conference 2022. Today is May 24th. This is session 7 on advancing quality assurance for web archives, putting theory into practice. The hashtag for the conference is #IIPCWAC22 if you'd like to tweet. And a very special thanks to the Library of Congress for hosting. Just a quick note to remind you to please use the Q&A tab at the very bottom of your screen there, next to chat. General chat, perfectly okay, but questions that you'd like questions that you'd like the panelists to address, please use the Q&A function, and please also vote for your favorite questions that you'd like you see the panelists address. So thanks very much as well to all the panelists that are here today. I'd like to call on them to say a few words about themselves, starting with maybe Dr. Brenda Reyes Ayala.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brenda Reyes Ayala. I am from the University of Alberta when I am an assistant professor. And today I'm going to be presenting on quality in web archives. Should I do the spiel about my work now or wait until everyone gets introduced?
Sure, go now.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you had some chance to look at my presentation before you joined the session, but if not, feel free to do it. So first of all, I'd like to thank Meghan and Grace from the Library of Congress for inviting me on this panel. I have to say that as a researcher, sometimes you create something and it goes out into the ether and you have absolutely no idea if anyone has ever read it. So very pleasantly surprised. So what I'm here to present is about, how do we create a definition of quality in web archives? What can we define as a good quality archive website, and what can we define as a bad quality archive website? Okay. Because often in web archiving, we really focus on the tools and how to crawl the heritrix and how to get everything that we want and how can we replay it accurately, but we don't have firm definitions of what we want. So what is good in web archives? So I define it as generally we regard a well-archived website to be a website that resembles as much as possible the original. It's a very simple one. So I created a theory to look at the different dimensions of quality in web archives. And there are 3 dimensions. There's correspondence, there is relevance, and then there is archivability. And correspondence being the first and the most important dimension, it is about correspondence is about the degree of similarity between the archive website and the live website as we see it now. The second one is relevance, which is the pertinence of contents of a web archive to the topic of the archive or to the contents of the rest of the archive. And the third one is archivability, which is composed of the components of a website that make it more difficult or easier to archive. So as you see, and so this theory is very open-ended. It was derived from looking at support tickets from the archivist service. And, I hope to see what other people have to say about it. So thank you.
All righty. I am Grace Thomas from the Library of Congress Web Archiving team. And Meghan, would you like to introduce?
Sure. I'm Meghan Lyon, also from the Library of Congress Web Archiving team.
Right. First of all, thank you for choosing us to speak. This is great. And thank you for Brenda for being here as well. In our talk, we discussed how we're building a sustainable quality assurance lifecycle for web archives at the Library of Congress. We referenced Dr. Ayala's grounded theory dimensions as a framework, and we implemented them at different stages of our very collaborative QA lifecycle. We cover the archivability dimension with our crawl vendor, who is MirrorWeb. And the relevance dimension via our semi-automated post-crawl QA process, where we filter the seeds by depth crawled and bytes collected per seed in order to highlight potential issues with the crawl. We've been developing the collaborative process to cover the correspondence dimension with our recommending officers at the library who select the content for the collections. And so they're most familiar with what the live version of the site looks like and could determine the correspondence between the live version and the archive version best. And then they can give us that information, and then our team can investigate further as needed. We've tested this process a little bit, and we've heard good things from the ROs who have tested it. And we hope to roll it out in a few months if any ROs are listening in and hearing about this for the first time. So our talk is also in conversation with Tom and Patricia Klambauer's Iipc WAC talk last year about QA, in that we're attempting to increase the value of the time that we're spending doing QA and better manage the resources that way, because it can indeed be a sinkhole of time. Also, our current crawl vendor is MirrorWeb, which has been wonderful and who are very involved in that collaborative QA process. But in building this QA lifecycle for the library, we wanted to ensure that our tools and our goals and our frameworks were vendor independent for sustainability and consistency in evaluating the quality of the archive over time. So that's our spiel.
So at this time, was there anything to add, Megan?
No, I was just going to say that that was for both of us. Thanks, Grace.
So at this time, I'd like to invite everybody to pose their questions to the panelists that they might have using the Q&A function, the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I don't see anything rolling in just yet. So maybe we'll start the conversation with a couple of questions that I have. Grace and Megan, could you comment on any tools that you might be using or that might be used by your vendor at Library of Congress to scan a target website in terms of the technologies used and its feasibility for collection and preservation?
Yeah, it's hard to do that, but MirrorWeb has a sort of pre-crawl analysis process in which I believe that they use the Wappalizer tool. I use it as a browser extension to kind of do a quick check on what technologies are on a website that might be affecting the crawl or replay of the archive version. And we also use an HTTP checker. There are lots of different kinds of those on the web to see, like, say, is a site down? Is it just the site's down for us? I think the website is actually called "This site is down. Is this down, or is it just me?" And so we do that in kind of an ad hoc way from site to site.
Brenda, I wonder if you would have comments on the potential development or the technical ideas, conceptual ideas for creating a tool that might help with issues that would be described in your model under archivability?
Thank you, Tom. That's a really great question. So for the last couple of years, I've been working on refining a little bit my, my theory. I think one thing one interesting thing that I thought was I'm working on the correspondence version, and I'm going through the process of operationalization, right? So how can you turn this very abstract definitions and frameworks and theories into something that actually works to be able to measure? So one thing I've been working on is on using visual similarity. So I've been working on some tools there are in Github that are meant to, what they do is that they take a screenshot of the archive website, take a screenshot of the live website, and then they do a similarity comparison, right? And that's supposed to give you an idea of the visual correspondence. So ideally, you'll be able to say, well, this archive website is, 50%, similar to the live website. Is this indicative of a quality assurance problem? And often in my research, I found that it is. This is what I've been working on now. Hopefully I can also continue to work on interaction because I have a lot of ideas on how to measure interactional quality. That helps.
Any other thoughts on that question? We do have a couple questions in the chat. So the first question for our panelists, what is the turnaround time for harvest through your processes?
Boy, that's a somewhat difficult question to answer because we kind of oversee the entire web archiving process. So just from crawling to being able to do QA, I think maybe is a good place to start, Megan. Does that sound good? We crawl weekly, monthly, and quarterly. So we send the seed list on a Wednesday for weekly, for example, and then the mirror web crawls over the next 6 days. And then we get the derivative reports that we use for part of our QA process at the end of that because they come from Heritrix and the logs. But I believe that the captures are usually up a little earlier than that. Is that right, Megan?
Yeah, they're up a little bit earlier. So we could start QA at that point, but kind of the purpose of the process that we have using reports at the end of the crawl is to use data to direct our limited resources of human power to finding issues. And our QA process does actually start before the crawl is run with the PCA report, because that kind of shoots out HTTP responses, I think. And so one of our team members is solely responsible for going through that. It's another spreadsheet, going through that spreadsheet and looking at all of the errors that have been thrown in that process. Some of these show up at the end of the crawl, some of these get resolved within the crawl. So it's really interesting to see which URLs do and don't have like what resolved itself. And also Grace put together a great script that merges all of these like CSVs and text files from different places into a usable report for me so that I can tell what's been looked at before by another team member in the context of a single crawl. We do not have a process yet for like cumulative crawls. And I think that's coming in the future.
I think maybe also an important thing to note on that is that we don't do any patch crawling. So because we're running our crawls at these regular frequencies, one of our goals is to try to make the next crawl better, whether that means we're going to try to get more things that we didn't get, or we might scope something down that we got too much from. And so it's kind of a living process in that way too.
Sorry, Tom. I just want to make one last comment on the question for turnaround time, harvest through process. Like Grace says, it's iterative. So I may be working on the same site through multiple crawls, or I may look at something once and then, it kind of loops out of the QA cycle for a while.
Thoughts on that, Brenda?
No, I mean, I think they would be best able to speak on their own QA process.
So we do have a highly upvoted question. Could the panelists please discuss when they decide to stop the Q&A process?
I'm shaking my head no. When I think it stops when we either decide something isn't resolvable or we resolve the issue, or something is taken out of the crawl by a recommending officer who maybe the scope of their collection is for a specific event, and after that event is over, it may not be worth crawling anymore, or it may be down. And so there are a lot of factors that play into that.
Meghan, as you're going through your list of 1,000 seeds in your spreadsheet, how do you decide when you're done with the spreadsheet?
When the next crawl is complete. I think that, the thing about QA is that it sort of never ends. Sorry to think. The process that we describe in the talk too is kind of it's kind of hard for Meghan and also Amanda Lehman on our team who do that post crawl QA process, because they're only seeing the things that are wrong with the web archive, and so they're going through this list of the worst offenders and kind of working towards the part of the list that starts to be okay. And it seems to me that that's kind of the stopping point, is when you start to see things that look to be a normal bite size, even if it might be a little small. It could just be a small website, and then kind of going from there, which I know gives Meghan some consternation as well, just to make sure everything's fine with the rest of the archive. No, that's a really good point. And that's why we're hoping to implement data collection with our capture assessment form that we're planning to roll out, because a lot of the web archives are really good, and we'd love to have data about our good content and be able to communicate it.
Hopefully I can add a little bit. So in my research with the archive clients, they have quite a few hundred clients. They're really the premier archiving platform. Is that when you stop the QA process is entirely determined by institutional resources. So this is where theory and practice bump up against money. They bump up against staff, against time limitations, so this is entirely up to the institution. Okay. And I think that sometimes we need to be, as we try to kind of measure how well we try to archive something, I think it's okay to say, we went 80% of the way there to archive this website. We were not able to get there 100%. We can stop now. So it's always good in your QA process to have thresholds for what is good enough, right? And I'm sure that many of you do say, well, we weren't able to do a perfect job, but we're able to get something. So hopefully that can help someone.
Moving along, we have a question for Dr. Ayala. Can you share the name of the visual comparison tool if it's publicly available? There's interest in what granular visual and behavioral aspects you evaluate for. Sasha Arden comments that works for an artist's website, and evaluating changes is very important for maintaining authenticity.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if I'm able to, Tom, I'm able to put in the link to the GitHub page. So I'm going to put the link in there, and feel free to go out and look at it, download it, or use it, just basically use it as an inspiration for your own work. So this particular piece of software does what I'm saying. It takes in a seed list of archive websites. It takes in a seed list of live websites, and it creates the screenshot comparison. So feel free to look at it. So now one interesting thing, so addressing kind of the rest of that question was, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the question. Oh, okay, it's in dismissed. Okay. So essentially right now, what this particular website, the WA screenshot compare software, what it will do, it will look at the just the visual similarity of it. Just what does it look like the original? Does it not look? So what you could do is you could choose it to describe, to say, well, you know, this archive website does not look like the original. There's probably a quality issue here. Okay, let's see if we can do something about it to better understand the quality. You can also, it actually does not, so if you're interested in looking at how websites change, I don't know if you are, but you could compare websites against each other and see how they change over time. Another thing that I am working on evaluating, but I haven't quite got there yet, is evaluate interactivity. So that means, are you able to interact with the archive website the same way as you're able to interact with the live website? So this is often done manually, just by clicking around, but I'm trying to find ways that we can measure it in some way. So hopefully that's a little bit more of that. And just let me show that I covered everything. Okay, let me see if I can find another link. Also, one thing that I would do that I'm currently looking at to look at change is how often does the website title change? Because sometimes when a website is redesigned to have a different look and feel, the website's title in the HTML will actually change. And you can measure like the degree of change. Like sometimes companies will shift to like a different CMS for their like hosting company and something like that, or they will add things, and that usually means, oh, a redesign of the page, or maybe that the website like the website has stopped existing even without a 404. Hopefully that will change. Let me go and see. Well, I'm going to stop and see if I can get that link for you.
That's brilliant, though. I really love that tip. Just have to say, Grace and I just both whipped out our pens and paper. We're like, how to look into that. So thank you.
It's a really interesting point in the sense that the creator might think of their resource as a new addition, because that's a flag maybe that they consider their resource to have taken on a new addition. It's a really good point. It's an interesting point. Question for Grace and Meghan. On a practical level, how much of the content roughly do you find, how much, whenever the recommending officers provide feedback, how often does that lead to recrawls or rescoping? 25%, 50%, more? Do the recommending officers aim to review all the seeds that they recommend for correspondence?
Well, there are a few questions there, but most of the time when a recommending officer emails us with information that they noticed about their website, web archive version of the website, you know, not behaving properly or missing links or missing something, that usually does result in scoping changes, or it kind of triggers an investigation that I do, and then that investigation, kind of the way that that the Archivit tickets work in Dr. Brenda's paper. We report the issues to our vendors if it's not something we can see immediately with scoping, and so see that could be fixed with scoping. And so yes, I would say like 85% of the time.
And also on that, we haven't fully launched the full-scale review for all of the recommending officers yet. And we've talked about a few different ways for how to break out that work for them. We're interested in sites that have been crawling for a long time at a priority. They don't need to necessarily review sites that have been in the crawl for a year. We have many sites that have been in the crawl for decades. We've talked about different ways to prioritize, because some recommending officers have one small collection, but some have, it's one recommending officer for 2,000 feeds. And so we have to figure out how we're gonna prioritize that for kind of everyone, and it might be different based on how big their collections are. So.
Right, and I would also say that because of the way that our crawls work in frequencies, there will probably be a recrawl unless, yeah, I can't think of when there wouldn't be. So.
Another highly upvoted question for all panelists. If you had to choose, what is one thing, a tool, workflow, or data that would help make QA processes easier and make your time spent on QA more efficient? Great question.
So great question, Ilya. I'll have to say this. I am of the firm belief that in order to be able to make the QA process viable, for the future of web archiving, we need to make it as automatic as possible. So we need to either semi-automate this, but possibly automate this. We need to be able to just have something that will spit out some measure of quality, and for humans to be able to take action on it. I think anything that is automated, anything that is done by software, after, obviously this entails a very long development process with many people involved and many rounds of evaluation, but anything that can be done to expedite this process, to have fewer people looking at it, is what we really need. We're all working, many of us are working in libraries. We don't have all the time in the world. I did a survey of current QA practices a couple of years back, and most of the people working on QA are actually doing so part-time. So most institutions don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to this issue. So the more we can automate, the more we can, the better we can take care of this issue. Yeah, great. Yeah, I like the comment. I'm doing QA while listening to this panel. Yeah, good work.
Meghan, would you like to share any dreams you have about QA?
I don't know. It's really hard. I almost sat down when I read the question. I think there isn't going to be a one size fits all approach. Like what works for an Archivate user for QA won't work for a web recorder or archive web page user, and won't work for the Library of Congress. So that's why I really like having like a set of principles and standards to apply in the whatever way that we can. I mean, I have a lot of very specific goals. I think one of the goals on our team is auto scoping. So some kind of software that looks at a website and automatically can tell if there are assets hosted on like a different domain from the website, like something that a human can very easily see, but doesn't get picked up by the workflow tool that we currently have. So auto scoping. I would like some kind of system for cumulative documentation where I can like take note of all the work that's done, and have all of the technical, like all of the technical discoveries that have been made about a website. Part of our talk was how in Digiboard, the curatorial workflow tool that we have at the library, we have collection metadata, but no technical data. And so like joining those two along with an assessment of quality would be fabulous.
I'm going to echo that last part for Meghan, that Meghan said. And yeah, I think like what I've been thinking mostly about is just things to make our process faster. So Meghan talked about the script that we have to create the like big Frankenstein spreadsheet. So like just to make that even faster to implement and to get that spreadsheet. And then I think about kind of what Meghan was talking about with being able to see things over time. And our vendor MirrorWeb is doing a really great job of trying to put together like these visualizations that we can use to view the crawls and like data about the crawls over time. So I think that'll be really helpful. And then, yeah, marrying the curatorial data and the crawl data, that is huge for us. And I don't know for the other tools like NetArchive Suite and Web Curator tool, I don't know if I'd love to hear about how that works in those tools and see if it's a little bit more combined than ours is. So yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, having the principles is the huge thing. I mean, that really just like put us ahead so far because we finally kind of had some direction of we could take the idea of the principle and then we could say, okay, how do we measure that? And then we figured out a process. So I think it really starts with that.
So we have about 3 minutes left in the session. There is a few questions that we have that are similar, so I'll ask you real quick. Do you contact website owners if you have an existing relationship with them about quality control issues that you encounter, particularly in the context of archivability?
Sometimes. With how fast do I need to do this? Yeah, without getting into like the nitty gritty of like our legal permissions policy at the library, in like very small number of cases, we will be in touch, but we do have a page for creating preservable websites on lock.gov that we share out, and we have FAQs for site owners, and yeah, Grace, did you have something?
I think you covered it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I think that concludes our session today. Just a really quick thank you to our panelists on the quality control session, Brenda, Meghan, and Grace.